An FBI records review by Fox News showed Daniel Richman was a special government employee for the FBI for at least 19 months, beginning in June 2015. With a security clearance and badge access to the FBI building here in Washington, the records show Richman answered directly to Director Comey. According to the records, Richman's stated responsibilities include the use of encryption by terror suspects, known as going dark. And in August of 2015, his projects were expanded to include the implications of federal investigations being brought to state and local prosecutors. But government transcripts also indicate Richman was sent talking points about the FBI's handling of the Clinton email investigation and why the case was different from other prosecutions for the mishandling of classified information. When he was a special government employee at the FBI, Richman also gave media interviews defending Comey, but none identify him as an FBI employee. In his Fox interview, Comey was pressed on his Senate testimony last year after he was fired by the president and why Comey did not reveal Richman's FBI status.
You call him a good friend and a professor, but you didn't reveal that you had hired him as a special government employee for the FBI to work on special projects. Why?
Because it wasn't relevant.
Did the Inspector General interview you about your handling of the memos?
Sure, yeah.
Has
already. And I expect a report from them, not on the handling of classified information, because that's frivolous, but on, did I comply with policy? Did I comply with my employment agreement?
As you just heard there, the Comey memos are now the subject of an Inspector General review over the handling of classified information. Richman did not respond to Fox's questions, including whether he told media outlets about his special FBI status when he gave them comments about Comey's handling of the FBI's Clinton email investigation, The FBI took our questions, but so far has not commented or offered any statement on Richman's status, Melissa.
Catherine Herridge, great reporting as always. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
News alert. At the same time those migrants are lining up the U.S. border, the state of Texas is launching a new lawsuit with 6 other states to force the Trump administration to end DACA, the Obama-era program that provided work permits to hundreds of thousands of young illegal immigrants. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton joins us now live. General, great to have you with us tonight.
Good evening from Texas.
Okay, so I think this is so interesting because you guys are suing the Trump administration to get rid of DACA. The Trump administration has been trying to get rid of DACA. 3 federal judges have stopped them thus far. There are numerous cases proceeding out there. How do you hope with your lawsuit to get something done that the administration hasn't been able to get done?
Well, we're hoping that a federal judge will rule correctly, as they did last time on our DAPA lawsuit, that what President Obama did was unconstitutional and unlawful, and therefore end DACA and force either Congress to act or not act, but it should not be done unilaterally by a president.
All right. The chair of the Texas Democratic Party had this to say in response to your lawsuit today. Paxton's cruel anti-immigration agenda will rip over 124,000 Texans away from their families and jeopardize our economy. The average age of DACA participants at the time they arrived in the U.S. is 6.5 years old. They should feel safe and accepted in the only country they know to be their home. Your response?
So this is a man that doesn't understand the U.S. Constitution. My job as Attorney General, which he should understand, is to enforce the law and make sure that the Constitution is followed. In this case, we have a president, President Obama, who acted outside of his authority. If we allow that to happen in one case, we lose the whole idea that our founders so deeply cared about, which was separation of powers, and that one person cannot make unilateral decisions for the rest of us.
Okay, so another state rep there in Texas, Rafael Anchia, says this: instead of wasting taxpayer funds to pick on these Americans, he's calling them Americans without status, the Attorney General should join the bipartisan chorus calling on Congress to fix a broken immigration system that denies these kids their rightful place at the American table. A lot of folks point out rightly they're not children now, most of them. It would be chronologically impossible based on the dates and who qualifies. But he says, listen, you should be using your voice to put pressure on Congress because they have tried and failed, even just in the last few months on a number of bipartisan potential solutions. They can't seem to get it together on the Hill.
Well, at least Rafael Anchia, Representative Anchia, got it right. This is up to Congress, and that's where he stopped short. It is up to Congress. It is not up to a president. And so, look, Congress has the authority. They have the sole authority to change the law. We can't allow a president of the United States to just unilaterally come in and change the law, and that's what happened here.
Okay, in the meantime, we've been covering for weeks now the story of the caravan and different groups of people that are coming to the border. They are going to be asking for asylum, many of them. How does this work in Texas when they show up at your border?
Well, it's challenging for us when you have this many people coming to the border at the same time. That's one of the unfortunate parts of how these immigration groups are operating. They're bringing a large number of people at the same time, which makes it a lot more difficult to process and creates all kinds of challenges for my state and obviously other states. So I would say that's the biggest challenge. I wish they would do this in a more methodical way, but here we are. We'll deal with it as we get it.
Well, and what about the fact that they travel, many of them are not from Mexico, they've traveled through Mexico to get to Texas. What role do Mexican authorities play in, we're told at times, making safe passage or escort for these caravans so they can get through Mexico and to the U.S.?
I think President Trump has said it right. It'd be nice if Mexico would guard their own border at the south, because obviously that would have an impact on our border. That obviously is not happening. Mexico is allowing these people to cross through their entire country, and then it ends up being a problem for us. So it is unfortunate that Mexico is not doing their job.
Well, and I know that you've been involved in a number of the cases of underage minors coming across and then seeking abortions in the U.S. too, and I know you've worried that that is a magnet for them as courts continue to order this administration to help facilitate that process. We'll keep an eye on that case and this new one today as well. Attorney General Paxton, great to have you with us.
So you know what the implication is. If you don't fully comply, that means you're hiding something. And if you're hiding something, that makes people suspicious that maybe you had something to do with the Russian interference.
Well, let's get the facts straight. We complied with everything actually relevant to the question of Russian interference. We turned over all of our communications with Russian media, Russian government, Russian business, although there was no communications to turn over. Likewise, anything having to do with WikiLeaks or with opposition research or Fusion GPS. We actually fulfilled all the requests. Most of them were blank. We didn't have any such communications. And what we did have with Russian government and media was really related to what time we were going to show up for an RT appearance and the logistics of our trip to the conference in Moscow with RT. So all of that was turned over. What we didn't turn over was material that basically protects the civil liberties of all Americans. So at a time when our civil liberties are really being seriously eroded, for example, the use of our private data. You know, we have a privacy protection. That's part of our civil liberties, but that's been horribly violated. 87 million Americans have basically had their data taken, and there are up to 2,000 data points on every American that are being used.
Listen, I hear you about that. That's certainly a concern.
Cambridge Analytica thing.
We've been covering it and the potential need for regulation and what will the industry do. However, back to you, what did you not turn over in the name of civil liberties?
Exactly. So what we did not turn over, and I should add, we also turned over our policy positions, which were the same as what we said publicly throughout the campaign. So there was nothing hidden there. We turned over our policy. What we did not turn over was our internal discussions about policy, which were really no great shakes, because there was not much difference between the policies that the Green Party has held for a long time and the policies of the campaign. So it's not like there's some, special golden goose that we're protecting here or some vulnerable conversation, but rather we're standing up on a principle. And that is the principle that's part of the First Amendment, our right to basically freedom of association. And that, that needs to be protected. And the courts have always upheld that.
Right, and we'll see. There'll be some litigation here if the government really decides that they want it. We'll see how it plays out. Let me ask you something. With all of the information that's come out since the campaign period, do you still have reservations about whether or not Russia interfered in our election and did so with obvious negative intent?
So let me say, I think it would be naive to think that Russia did not try to interfere. Certainly that's what the United States does, and that's not to justify it. Interference is wrong, and it's an assault against democracy, and it should be pursued. But we should pursue it knowing that we do it too. As James Woolsey, the former CIA head, recently said publicly, I believe it was on Fox, yes, we're doing that, and we always do it. And the records show that we do it about twice as much as the Russians over the course of the past, really since the Second World War. So, this is an issue, and it should be solved, I think, not by, retribution, not by going to war, not by saber rattling. It should be solved really through dialogue and diplomacy, which is showing, that it gets real results on the Korean Peninsula right now. We need to adopt that position right now and not go at it with bombs and missiles and threats, but with international dialogue. And we need a treaty for international non-interference in elections.
That would really be the case for Russia to make, not from the American perspective. Of course, there's hypocrisy involved. Lots of different big state actors do lots of things that they may not want people to know about. But let Russia say that the United States did this to us and here's how they did it, so this is fair play. From the American perspective, and you running for president more than once of this country, shouldn't your position have been, this was bad what they did, they're trying to do it right now, and we have to stop it?
I think that kind of position, which says that we're in a totally different category from the rest of the world, is not working. This century of American domination, sort of didn't play out the way we thought it would. We're embroiled now. We have the military in practically every country around the world. In the recent taxes that people paid, the average American paid almost $3,500 that went into the Department of Offense, I would call it, not the Department of Defense, $3,500, whereas we put $40 into the EPA. 57% of our discretionary dollars now are going into the military. It's part of a mindset that says, we're always right and they're always wrong, and we're going to be, dominating militarily and economically. We're in a multipolar world right now, and, we need to behave as an exemplary member of the community, and that is by upholding ourselves and leading the way on international law, human rights, and diplomacy.
Well, one of the ways you do that
is... That approach is really paying off on the Korean Peninsula right now, and I think we should be using it more broadly.
Well, that's an interesting nod to the success of the administration, and it's echoed by many others. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully, there is peace on the Korean Peninsula. That may be something that Russia is not that interested in, and that goes to why there's such tension between the countries. Let me ask you one last thing. Why did you go to the RT anniversary and put yourself in that position? You had to know that it would have negative implications for you politically and optically.
So remember, this was 2015, and this was at the time that our president, Barack Obama, was still on a track of the reboot with Russia. So, we can, when we use the retrospectoscope, it's important to put us in the context of the time. So it wasn't nearly as controversial as it would be right now. But that said, I think it's really important. Diplomacy is all about talking with the people that you have real problems with. And that was really my intent. On that trip, I not only talked with some low-level Russian officials. I actually did not speak with Vladimir Putin, although I would have liked to, but there was not any opportunity to do that. I also spoke with Jeremy Corbyn. I spoke with the deputy climate negotiator for China about the real issues, the crises that we have to solve, and we have to solve them in dialogue and diplomacy. And that's not only the war in the Middle East and in Syria, it's also this confrontation with nuclear weapons that we're heading towards, which is extremely dangerous, and the climate catastrophe. We need to be opening doors of dialogue right now, not closing them.
All right, Dr. Jill Stein, we appreciate you taking the opportunity to come on and answer these questions.
Great to talk with you as always, Chris.
All right.